The best way to go from Bakersfield to Mojave is through the Tehachapi Pass. That may sound easy, but it wasn't always that way. This line was completed in 1876. The name Tehachapi is said to come from a borrowed Kauai-Sioux word that refers to a hard climb. It's a good description of how it must have seemed in the early 1800s. If you were at the lowlands here, thinking of venturing up to 3,970 feet, where the town of Tehachapi is now located, it would have been an epic trip on foot and full of perils. In the roughly 7-mile track run from Caliente Siding up to a siding at Cliff, you can see the effort it took just to gain 670 feet in elevation. As the crow flies, that would only be about 1.5 miles between those 2 points. Things open up into a beautiful valley that looks at its best in the springtime. By the time you reach where the present-day lower town of Caliente is, you would have discovered a myriad of canyons, most with dead ends leading nowhere. This train is heading toward the famous Tehachapi Loop. This train is heading back to Bakersfield in a crew change. These scenes were taken after a very wet interval, swelling the creek to new dimensions. The basic plan, built in the 1874 to 1876 time frame, still exists. The SP granted trackage rights to competitor Santa Fe in 1899. Here's an SP train with abundant lumber loads and a Santa Fe train running in the opposite direction. A large horseshoe curve reverses direction to climb up to tunnels 1 and 2, where the direction reverses again. Trains cross over Bealville Road. You can just make out the end of this downhill SP train on the upper right. We'll pick up between Tunnel 1 and 2 for a few trains climbing toward Allard. This is the SP's famous oil tank train, started in September 1983. It carried crude oil. It consisted of a pair of trains of 72 car sets each. One set was always heading toward the oil fields near Bakersfield for a reload, and this set is heading to a refinery in Carson, California. The next train will be a mixed freight out of Tunnel 2 heading to Allard. The first boxcar is an L&N, or Louisville and Nashville car, far from home. A Great Northern boxcar, a Southern boxcar, another L&N boxcar, and a jade green boxcar from the New York Central that's patched over as a Conrail car, run by our camera. The orange Longview, Portland, and Northern car came from a short line tied to the SP. It has paper or wood products inside. 5 flat cars bring loads of what look like M113 armored personnel carriers, weighing in at about 11 tons each. They have a sealed door at the rear, requiring that you duck to enter the inside that has seating for a crew of 2 and 11 other soldiers. Several 100,000 of these were once in use. The dark blue boxcar is from another lumber short line that was extensively used to film the 1973 movie Emperor of the North. We can only guess what all the SP and Cotton Belt boxcars have inside, but the reddish all-door boxcar is from Simpson Lumber, and it's an easier guess. Another L&N boxcar and later another Southern boxcar precede some open lumber-loaded bulkhead flat cars. A rare car in green is from the Pennsylvania Short Line, New Hope, and Ivyland Railroad. A very early use of protective plastic wrap shows up here. A group of USLX reporting marks are on these leased boxcars. This train is mostly the same SP and SSW, or cotton belt cars, with the surprise green and yellow door from the struggling Seattle and North Coast short line that was bankrupt and abandoned by 1984. The SP partly open door reveals a lumber load, safe from the elements. After the yellow rail box leased car is a bright orange main central boxcar. Before all the huge mergers after this time frame, you can imagine what a number of railroad interchanges it made to arrive here. Next, a train heading to Bakersfield brings another interesting mix of cars. You can hear the helper set coming. Just as they get here, the film will run out. They are normally 100-foot film reels that lasted about 3.5 minutes. So shooting in color movie film was challenging and required knowing how many minutes you had left on a small 100-foot roll. It explains why most filmers would shoot the locomotives and a few cars and shut the camera off until the caboose was in view and shoot for maybe a few seconds more. Of course, anyone shooting in the early consumer video formats did not have that challenge to worry about. They only had to worry about the terrible picture quality they could produce in those VHS video camera days. This Santa Fe train just left Tunnel 2, and a switch and a siding will allow the Santa Fe train to pass by a waiting SP train. We'll move along through some nice photogenic scenery, working our way toward Cliff. There are many great camera angles here to create some nice photogenic trains in beautiful springtime scenery. Another helper set drifts downgrade, heading back toward Caliente. Sometimes helpers would run all the way back to Bena. So imagine walking here hundreds of years ago. Look out into all the hills and ravines presented ahead and try to guess which ravine to take that won't eventually become a dead end, leaving you with no choice but to backtrack and find a different way. 8 units lead this Santa Fe train. Look how small early containers once were. This train crossed Bealville Road, back where there's a visible cluster of structures. The next scene will be up on a siding at Cliff, with an SP oil can train where the observer could look out over all the scenic hills and valleys. It is doubtful that access to many of these locations is now allowed. Next is a dash ahead to Woodford, where the tracks cross under Highway 58. You can just make out the highway overpass off in the distance. The SP tank train, referred to as the oil can train, had special tank cars that had flexible connections on the top for filling the entire train from one connection on the end. You'll see these flexible connections as the cars run past the camera. "30,000 horsepower was the typical total power between the front and including the mid-train helpers. Next will be a descending Santa Fe train with a long string of red Santa Fe boxcars. From the early days of TV news gathering, local TV stations relied on 16mm movie film to shoot events outside of the station's studio. Movie film hung on despite all the chemicals and the expense to develop film and the need to use telecine converters to adapt it to TV video NTSC broadcast format. News-gathering field portable video cameras using tape arrived with the U-Matic series of 3/4-inch tape cartridges around 1974. The picture quality wasn't quite as good as the film it replaced. Better designs arrived by the mid-1980s. Those portable video cameras by companies such as Sony and Ikegama were much better, but they cost as much as a very expensive car. All of these steps came before high definition and widescreen video ever existed. Railfans that captured history on movie film did us a great favor. Others that switched to consumer portable VHS cameras were giving up a lot of picture quality for convenience and the 2 hours of recording time compared to using color movie film. Movie film was developed with an expensive chemical process. The movie film reels for Super 8 movie film gave about 3 minutes of filming time at 24 frames a second. If the slower 18 frames per second rate was used, it would increase to 4 minutes, but with a stroboscopic look to the action. A long freight climbing the Tehachapi Loop can take 5 minutes or more to capture. Invariably, the film will run out about the time the mid-train helpers show up. If you were fast changing the reels of film, you might only miss 15 seconds or so. So that explains why so many films-based Railfan productions don't show the entire train. They were trying to conserve film for the locomotives and maybe the caboose. Freight cars weren't the priority, and passenger trains usually were shot in their entirety, however, since they were a lot shorter. Next will be a descending Santa Fe train with a long string of red Santa Fe boxcars. These views will bring back classic railroading that is gone forever.